Okay, so we now are able to read from a web page. We're able to see the HTML text. We're able to take that HTML text and send it to Python's HTML parser. And what we're seeing here is an HTML tag, a head tag, a title tag, a script tag, a script tag, a meta tag, and so on. And these are the attributes of the tag. So you can see the HTML tag has some information about the XML namespace, and it shows that. And it says the XML language is English, and the language is English, and so on and so forth. So if we scroll down here, we can see, for example, there's an A tag, which has the attribute href, and going to hashtag nav, for example. So this doesn't tell us much, but it tells us the start of each and every tag that is coming up in our code. So we can do the same thing, for example. So I'm going to take this one out, and I'm going to move it down here. Sorry, I'm going to put the pass back in here just to make sure. And here I'm just going to print, oops, the data. So this is going to show everything that's inside of the tags. So you can see a very different look. We can see a bunch of different languages inside of there. We can see the stuff that people are clicking on inside of tags, link tags. We can see a couple places where there's some compressed, squeezed lines, 97 lines of text that show up inside of there. So the data is very different, but these are kind of decontextualized. So how the heck do I make sense of this? Well, the basic web parser is just trying to give you the structure of the different tags. And it's up to you to kind of try and figure out, when do I care about the data? When is it interesting to grab the data inside of here? So I need to come up with a strategy. So let's start with a very simple strategy. Let's take this away, put this back for a second. All right. So what we care about here is, let's just say if the tag is equal to div. That's really what we care about to begin with. We care about div tags. Let's only print out div tags then. So we're going to do a print tag attributes. Again, we're going to go back to this line. I don't need to pass anymore. So let's run our code with this real simple item. We're going to start simple and just go find. So these are all the div tags. Notice I don't see the HTML tag and the header tags and the A tags and everything else. Just div tags. And so the div ID is pop message. ID is pop message GPOS, so on and so forth. The one we thought we saw before was something called DD. So let's see if we can find, oh, there you go. This is the one we saw before that we identified when we did the inspect. So if I go back to here, you can see ID, DD, W90, TR, clock date, all that stuff in there. I can go see ID, this is class, ID is DD, class is W90, TR, clock date. We've definitely found the tag right here. So out of all the div tags, the only one we really care about is the one that has the ID of DD. So at this point then, what we can say is, well, we have a bunch of div tags, but I only care when the div tag contains the ID that is the DD, right? So what I can do is, let's go through four. I think we can. Yeah, I think we can tuple this one. I think this is a tuple coming back. So we can say name value in attributes, right? So let's just really quick. Let's test it out. Print name comma value. And so what we're going to see is, for all the div tags, we're going to print all the attributes as name value pairs. Let's just make sure this code works. Code small. Make sure it's oops, invalid syntax. I'm sorry, name in attributes. I Java'd that one up. Java puts the colon there. Sorry. All right. So yes. So now we can see in the div tag we have the ID pop message. ID pop message. So we have, instead of all of them as a list of them, we now have each one individually. So we can do even more here. We can say, if name is equal to ID and value is equal to DD, well, then we can say print, let's just print the attributes. Make sure we found the right one. See if there's more than one out there that has the ID of DD, for example. So if I run this, all right, just one. One tag with the ID of DD. Title, press for calendar. Okay, so um, that looks like we're at the right place. Let's see something here. Yeah, yeah, that looks like we're at the right place at this one. And if I press this, you can see the calendar pops up. So that's good as well. All right, so we've now found the tag and when the tag starts. So what do we do when we find the tag and we're ready for the tag starts? Well, it's at this point that we care about the data. So I could say down here, for example, print data, but remember, this prints the data every single time. So all the data gets printed out. It's not just when we hit this point that it's going to call this. It's going to call this every single time it has data. It's going to call this every single time it has data. So what I really want to do is when I find the tag I care about, at that point and only at that point do I want to grab the data. So how do I do that? Well, this is where being an object, writing a class helps us. So you might have saw the note here. Set up any data you need to process the HTML. Well, what if I had a flag up here? And let's just say it's called self.grabNow. And it's going to be a Boolean. So anytime I see the tag is ID, the tag is a div with the ID of DD, well, I want to say grab now is true. All right. So at that point, I can say, well, if self.grabNow, that's the only time I want to print the data. Does that make sense? So we go through all the tags. We're not printing data because grab now is false. And then once we finally see the tag we want, then we grab the data. So let's see what happens there. Let me close this so we can get rid of the excess and run it clean. Oh, wait, it still printed everything, didn't it? Oh, no, it didn't print everything. It printed the date that we're looking for. Day, month, and year. But then it continued to print everything. Why? Well, once grab now is true, it is true forever. Until I set it false. So there's two ways I can handle this. So one of the ways could be I could just simply, when I grab it, I can say self.grabNow is equal to false. I grab one thing and I'm done. And that's actually the simplest and easiest way I can solve that problem. Notice I just grabbed the date now. Beautiful. The other thing I could do, perhaps, especially especially if there's a hierarchy to it. So if I'm dealing with something that is not just the div that has text inside of it, but maybe there's additional structure inside the div, then what I could do as well is I could come down to the end tag and I could say, well, if tag is equal to div, once I hit the end of every div tag, then, and remember it's every one, I can say self.grab now is equal to false. And so this theoretically should work as well. Let's just check it out. Yes, that worked as well. So either one of those is acceptable, but I want you to see that the end tag is there so that way you can say, okay, well, I'm done with this. So imagine it this way. Let's say I was looking for a table of data. And so I would say grab now when I find the start of the table. And then I wouldn't stop grabbing until I reached the end of the table, for example. So I'd be looking for the end tag. So I can't necessarily stop grabbing immediately. Okay? So that is, generally speaking, the strategy for how I grab data out of HTML pages. I look for start tags and identify them in some way. I then grab data, maybe do something else with it, but grab data. And then when I hit an end tag, then I can say I'm done grabbing data. Again, there's many strategies you can employ here, and there's many ways to parse text. But this is a really quick and simple way to be able to grab data. So what do I do with this data? Well, when I get it, the data obviously is the date I want. Well, you know, how do I grab this date? Well, I can add another attribute, right? Let's say it's the time inside of here. Um, well, we have no time to start with, um, and so I'm going to return that, which, by the way, doesn't fix. Date provided you return none, which is equal to none, but should not be. So it doesn't fix everything here. Um, but what I want to do is when I find that time, that date more specifically, it's the data. All right. So I'm going to use attributes to keep track of the status, including the answer I want to give back. And so when I call this, I'm going to go through, and these are going to be called a whole bunch of times, as we saw. It's going to process that old HTML. But I'm still, when I get to the point I'm interested in it, I'm going to say, okay, grab the next thing, and then I grab it, and I save it, and then it continues to process the rest of it, and then at the end, I've saved that data along. So let's try this now. Boom, I nailed it. So I didn't actually make you parse the date. The reason why we kept getting the exceptions inside of there is when I get the web date from you, I actually parse that actual date that comes in as a date. So I've given that logic. I'm handling all the parsing for you for the date. And then turning it into date time and then checking it matches and all that sort of stuff. So that is the basics. That's the foundation of what's going on here. Um, this is a primer, but it really is simple code overall. The real trick is how do you use this idea of start tags, data, and end tags to solve the problems you're being asked. In many of the problems, you'll be accessing data on the internet. Many others, I will give you the HTML because that's the more interesting part of it. The accessing the internet is relatively simple and problematic for testing because what if they change that web page? So that's why I give you some fixed HTML in some of the exercises. But remember this exercise as a way to get code started. Remember this exercise as a process. Don't jump to writing the whole thing. Work through it until you understand the data you're seeing, understand the patterns in the data you're seeing, and kind of basically inch your way to daylight there. Find one little step at a time to build your understanding. And that's the strategy that I think is the most important and will get you the farthest on these exercises.